How many people in the room earn money by doing some kind of therapy?
New York, spring 1991, and much public relief at the ending of the Gulf War.
Put them up high so we can see it.
A victory for the military-industrial complex, less so for Iraqi civilians and the environment.
Put them up high, don't be ashamed. Right up there, right up there. Up.
The war has upset and disturbed many on the left, including this man speaking to a room full of therapists, analysts, social workers, teachers, and other interested parties.
And how many people have been or are in therapy as on the other end of it? All right, so it's fair to be talking about therapy then.
His is a voice and a sensibility that is no stranger to posing provocative and often quite challenging questions. A let's not beat around the bush kind of guy, a cut to the chase, brass tacks kind of guy.
And I think that's something very important for therapists to consider the role of it is in the society. And it's very easy to go to the plumbers' conventions and listen to people give papers on how to do it. Whereas I think the question is think about what it is, what its point is, what it's all about now. What it's all about now. Are we really talking about what matters in these hours?
This is the voice of James Hillman, known to colleagues and friends as Jim, the esteemed archetypal psychologist, social commentator, and intellectual firebrand, who is teaching one of his popular and well-attended weekend workshops. This one is called The Politics of Feeling. Hillman is a tall and lean 64-year-old in 1991, grey-haired with a hawkish profile. He still has, though, that puer spirit, as he might call it, that unquenchable spirit of youth and rebellion. I say hawkish, but perhaps at this stage in his life he most resembles that bald-headed eagle which graces the seal of the U.S. Department of State, 13 martial arrows bristling from its left talons, a creature embodying both wisdom and fierceness, a fitting emblem for a man who has spent a great deal of his life navigating the complexities of the human psyche with the precision and grace of a seasoned warrior.
Now, I don't think I want to, but I'm bound to start off by attacking everybody and everything, because that's usually, being a child of Mars, that's my way. But you know, Mars is the starter or the initiator, and it's the way things begin. It's usually very annoying to people who are not children of Mars. They rather creep in slowly or feel their way or find the right atmosphere or a lot of other things first. But I feel that it's necessary to say things that lead us to extremes.
This child of Mars was born in 1926 and grew up in that tense interlude between two world wars. In this weekend seminar, he will at one point quote Jung's idea of enantiodromia, which Jung himself had taken from Heraclitus, a psychological law describing how an extreme position or feeling or belief system eventually provokes a shift in the opposite direction, like a pendulum swinging too far one way eventually needs to swing back in order to find some balance. The American dream, that collective pursuit of prosperity, progress, and plenitude, always rode high on self-improvement mantras, and by the late 1980s and early 1990s, bookshelves were overflowing with titles like John Bradshaw's Healing the Shame That Binds, 1988, pioneering the concept of inner child work, as well as Harville Hendrix's Getting the Love You Want, published in the same year, which placed the blame for couples' relationship troubles squarely on childhood experiences. Stephen Covey's The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, published in 1989, ushered in a new era of self-help, one focused on practical tips and life hacks, a trend that has flowered into our current-day explosion of motivational YouTube channels and podcasts. Rogan, Huberman, Peterson, as well as all those buff biohackers and data-driven well-being alchemists, are all quintessential byproducts of this cultural shift. Walking into a Barnes & Noble bookstore of that era would also have meant being eyeballed by the reality TV star and future president of the United States, whose whole ethos might, to this day, be summarized by the title of his 1987 bestseller, I Can Make You Rich.
Jim, I'm sorry, you're fired. Get out of here. Right?
This trend wasn't just confined to self-help books. Television had also in this period become a platform for exploring personal journeys and emotional baggage. Oprah Winfrey, with her confessional interviews and focus on self-improvement, emerged as a dominant figure in this arena, making psychological as well as psychotherapeutic ideas and ideals accessible, if not even de rigueur, to a massive audience.
In order to participate in this next exercise, you first need to relax yourself, recall the first home you can remember as a child, and actually look for and try to visualize yourself as a little child in that house. Yes. Okay. John?
Now, close your eyes, and just let yourself go back to the first memories. It may be an apartment, a farmhouse, whatever. It may be an orphanage. It may be wherever you live.
Hillman's initial question, how many people in this room earn money by doing some kind of therapy, likely judging by the nervous titters it elicited, struck a nerve with his audience. Like many of his inquiries, it was pivoted in order to make them grapple with an uncomfortable truth, that perhaps they, like everyone else in the culture at the time, and even more so now, were using therapy and self-development practices to bypass or even ignore pressing social, political, and environmental issues needing our collective attention. This is Hillman speaking on a radio show a year later alongside the novelist and critic Michael Ventura, the two of them having just written a book together on the topic.
Well, the idea of processing everything doesn't give enough recognition to the ground material of structures that are part of your character. So Americans tend to go into therapy with the idea of transformation. That's become a T word for me. I mean, everything can be transformed, which means everything can become something else, which neglects what it is. It's not an exploration of what is, it's an attempt to process it. It's an industrial fantasy. Make it better, value added. And we're born with certain structural nuggets that are the basis of our personalities, our differences, and our character. And I don't want mine messed with too much.
It's also where the psychotherapeutic community, and in some ways the New Age community, are mirroring the consumer culture.
That's Michael Ventura, Hillman's sparring partner and co-author of the provocatively titled volume, We've Had 100 Years of Psychotherapy and the World's Getting Worse.
It is, you can transform, you can make of this what you will, which is exactly the same thing that the industrialists say of the earth. And these parallels are not noticed, that we're trying to do with our psyches in certain spheres of life exactly what the industrialists are doing with the earth, what government is trying to do with power, and we're trying, James and I are trying to get at some of these blind spots, some of these mirrorings that psychotherapy is not aware of.
I wonder why you love me, baby. I hardly love myself at all. I think we're both a little crazy. We need some therapy, that's all.
Hello, my name is Steve Wasserman. I'm a London-based psychotherapist and former teacher, and in this podcast series, I'd like to revisit and re-examine the enduring insights and controversial ideas of James Hillman and Michael Ventura 30 years on. Psychotherapy, much like organized religion, often struggles to confront and explore its own shadow. And that's precisely what I hope to focus on here with other interested and interesting voices.
I know that there's someone out there who knows what the hell is happening. You know that we must do something, 'cause God knows and He's not helping.
That's Loudon Wainwright III, by the way, singing in a tone that is both somewhat arch, but also quite sincere about the absolute necessity of therapy for individuals as well as couples striving to understand themselves and remain united, an idea that has been a cornerstone of our social fabric since the song was written in the late 80s. Therapy, as the hyper-individualized pursuit of self-transformation, rather than as a quest for a deeper understanding of our own character or soul, is Hillman's principal critique of both personal and group therapy, a critique that he had been refining since the early 70s. These ideas emerged not just from a sociological or academic standpoint, but also from his extensive experience as a clinician, a psychotherapist, or in his preferred terminology, an archetypal psychologist. Hillman does not dispute the value of empathetically addressing the suffering and challenges faced by ourselves and our fellow human creatures. His main beef is with the century-long experiment of psychotherapy itself, initiated by Freud and Breuer in the 1890s, with their efforts to treat somatized neurotic conditions through a new kind of freely associative conversation. The heart of his argument lies with psychotherapy's overemphasis on individual solutions to deep and often systemic societal problems.
15 million Americans are drawn into 500,000 meetings each week, 200 types of recovery groups and so on. I think there are many more. I mean, Monday night you're an abused child, and on Tuesday night you're fat, and on Wednesday night you're an exhibitionist, and Thursday night you go and meet with the AA recovery people, and then you meet Friday with those who are recovering from therapy and so on. And you've got these immense, you go to one of these groups in which you are called, not by politics, not by ancestry, but by your symptom. And we unite through our symptom now. We unite because we're fat. We unite because we're exhibitionists. These little units that are meeting all over the United States every single week, and many of you may even be leading them or in them. It's not funny, it's a fact. I mean, you know, facts aren't funny, they are. It's not because you have to deal with a coal mine. It's not a union meeting. It's a meeting about your symptom. But if we examine these as places where communal emotion is actually going on, that it's not going on in other things, it's actually going on there. That's where you feel very loyal.
The year before this workshop, Hillman's ideas had been given a massive publicity boost with a cover story in the LA Weekly bearing the very provocative Hillman-esque title, "We've had 100 years of psychotherapy and the world's getting worse." The article was written by his friend and verbal sparring partner Michael Ventura, who would go on to produce with Hillman this one-of-a-kind book of the same title in 1992. A book that I have personally always loved and cherished, revisiting it every couple of years as much for its sharp and punchy prose as for its rich and complex ideas, presented in the form of dialogues and letters, as opposed to the more conventional format that we've come to expect from psychology textbooks or self-help volumes. But it's also a book I turn to whenever I feel troubled with the role that I am being hired to play in other people's lives, as a kind of professional agony uncle, tending to the various existential woes of anyone who can afford to pay me, with the often all too bland arsenal of psychotherapeutic tools that we have for this purpose, treating human alienation and suffering that all too often mirrors my own, the existential suffering that has not really been that much diminished to any great extent by having therapy over the years and by using these very same tools on myself. In 1990, there were only a handful of books that dared to put the entire ethos of psychotherapeutic practice on the couch, to therapize therapy, if you like, as well as talk about its often unacknowledged shadow elements, such as the fundamental power imbalance that lies at the heart of the therapist-client relationship, often predicated on the cult of the expert. As if I or anyone else, particularly in this day and age of information accessibility, even overload, might possess some kind of arcane knowledge about their psyche, akin to a modern-day oracle or a keeper of ancient wisdom. There seems to be an ever-increasing urgency to label quite normal but upsetting emotions and experiences with medical-sounding diagnoses. Most of my clients or patients now have ADHD, as do I, based on the symptoms given, as do most of us with a smartphone in our pocket. Neurodivergency is another new buzzword to describe the fundamental weirdness of our human minds, which have always pretty much been this way. A large number of my clients, struggling to get their needs acknowledged or met in romantic relationships, now believe their partners to be covert or even overt narcissists. And yet our culture feeds from this trough of self-regard and wanton narcissistic entitlement in every sphere. Everyone is struggling with their mental health, including me, but the answer always seems to be that we just need more therapy, more inner work, that's all.
Our whole field of psychotherapy may simply be a reaction to symptoms. Therapy invents new ideas and new interpretations. In the last 10 years, we have three very big new symptoms called borderline personality, narcissism, and codependency, all of which could be understood as reflections of what goes on actually in therapy. The therapist is codependent they're in a codependency relation. The constant self-reflection that goes on in therapy is a narcissistic activity. And the whole transference world which is examined is a borderline world. So the therapy has now got to the place where you see what I'm saying there? The therapy's now almost invented its own diseases which it's now treating.
I think it's fair to say that psychotherapy is our new secular religion. Every podcast or YouTube channel that I watch invariably ends up discussing psychotherapeutic or self-developmental themes or issues. Any query that I put to an AI bot about something on my mind invariably ends with a suggestion that I might like to pay a psychotherapist a visit to discuss the issue further. Every second advert on YouTube, even when I'm watching Penn and Teller's Fool Us or stand-up comedy, seems to commence with a piece of publicity from BetterHelp, a large online therapy platform offering access to licensed therapists like myself through text, phone, or video chat. And underlining all of this is the unquestioned notion that our existential suffering can only rarely be addressed, just like God and monotheistic religions promised earlier generations, through the expensive and individualized route of formal psychotherapy. Psychotherapy, rather than prayer, charitable acts, or the creation of niche podcasts like this one, is now advertised as the definitive solution by BetterHelp and every other purveyor of these services, including my own website, which reinforces this notion with its focus on individual private care for your mental well-being. But maybe the solution isn't singular, maybe it lies in a more multifaceted approach for our shared human struggles and woes.
Have you ever stood in a crowded room and just felt so painfully alone?
Here's an example of a BetterHelp ad with the kind of engagement one might receive from discussing these questions with a therapist.
Have you ever stood in a crowded room and just felt so painfully alone?
That disconnected feeling, even surrounded by others, speaks to the profound human need for genuine connection.
Or I don't know, just stared in a mirror trying to recognize any part of the person staring back at you. It's
The struggle to see oneself clearly and feel a sense of authenticity is a journey many undertake.
From the moment we're born, we're just taught exactly who we're supposed to be, how to love, how to hate, how to fit in, and I'm realizing there was no choice. I've made no choices in my life. I've just been going along with it.
Questioning the degree to which societal pressures have shaped your identity is an important act of self-reflection.
And the sad part is that I've been living in this mode for so long that I don't know who I actually am, or what I want, or what makes me happy, or what I want to do with my life.
The search for purpose and clarity about one's true desires is an existential struggle, yet also an opportunity for profound self-discovery.
What am I doing here?
Is there anything that all the therapies would agree upon? I thought it was the development of the individual.
Getting paid.
Pardon?
Getting paid.
Getting paid.
Don't bottle up those awful feelings. You're not the one who knows it all. There is a nice big box of Kleenex. If you break down and start to bawl.
Perhaps I'm sounding somewhat disillusioned and burnt out by the practice of psychotherapy, and perhaps I am. But I also do still love having and participating in this very human and often very heartfelt ritual. For what's not to love? When was the last time, other than with your therapist, that you sat down face to face with another human being who allowed you to explore in a nurturing and empathic way something troubling you, something on your mind, or that you were grappling with, for up to an hour, the whole conversation wholly focused on you and your individual concerns, the only goal in terms of that other person's interactions being to support your general well-being, with no reference to their well-being or anyone else's for that matter. Hillman and Ventura, in a radio interview they did the following year to publicize their book, took great pains to clarify that their message was not anti-therapy per se, but a more overarching one.
I'm not interested in throwing out therapy. I'm interested in throwing out its self-blindness or working over its ideas, not stopping therapy. What do you say, Michael, about that? Whatever helps you get through the night?
Yeah, whatever gets you through the night. As Frank Sinatra, I think, said first, and then John Lennon took it from Frank Sinatra.
There are many reasons for therapy, but the main thing is that therapy has got itself into a place where it's quite smug. And it feels it's the only, lots of things are bad in the culture. Politics is bad, education isn't working, the banking system's broken down, the military-industrial, all these things are bad, but therapy imagines itself as still good. And that produces a lot of smugness and smoothness.
But at the same time, there's no place in this book where we say don't go to therapy. Again and again, we say, yes, people have to do inner work. Yes, the therapists are doing a frontline job on a lot of this. We're not jettisoning, we're not throwing out that. What we're saying is therapy has blind spots, therapy has shadows, and these aren't being explored.
And therapy's had to do an awful lot of heavy-duty work of keeping the net underneath the society. So it's certainly not an attack on therapists.
Hillman, who had plenty of shadowy dimensions to his own character, would also, at this point in his life, perhaps have understood how hypocritical such an attack might seem. 20 years previously, having been cancelled, I guess we might say, today, by the Jung Institute in Zurich, where he worked as director of studies for sleeping with one of his patients, Hillman was more than happy to have another woman that he was having an affair with, Patricia Berry, also a former patient and student, utilize her own private therapy sessions with a Jungian analyst to deal with some of the shame and guilt that she felt in contributing to the downfall of Hillman's marriage to Kate Kempe, his first wife. Kate had also been having an affair with her own analyst, Carl Mayer. In fact, the four of them, Hillman, Kate, Mayer, and Mayer's wife, had even gone on a month-long jaunt to Greece together, paid for by Kate. Much like our often wayward and impulsive mating rituals today, Hillman's cloak and dagger sexual and professional intrigues and strife were all largely worked out, validated, and most likely normalized by the navel-gazing confessional booths of private psychotherapy, rather than openly discussed or confronted within wider public discourse. What I'd like to do with this podcast is to take up some of these explorations into the shadow side of psychotherapy that Ventura and Hillman launched us on 30 years ago, talking to those who are both sympathetic to the ideas espoused in this landmark book, but also with those who deeply disagree with Hillman and Ventura's core premises. Hillman called his books and their ideas an empty protest, based on the theological idea of kenosis.
The idea from Greek means vain, hollow, fruitless, void, empty. In Christian theology, kenosis refers to Christ's emptying himself of his divine power, of his unity with Almighty God, in order to enter this world as a man. Now, kenosis seems now the only political way to be, emptied out of certainty. Otherwise, you become a fundamentalist, united with an almighty ideology, protected from above by a cause. Therapy is just one more of the current ideologies, keeping its believers from the panic of kenosis, the panic that comes when the whole structure of guarantees has collapsed. Therapy becomes a salvational ideology.
Hillman and Ventura's protest, much like any other protest occurring in our streets at the moment against the wars in Israel or Ukraine or the environmental emergency, is empty because it cannot really offer a meaningful alternative to the existing socio-economic and political systems that we have and have grown accustomed to. This is another area that I'd like to explore in more depth, as well as engaging in some broad conceptual discussions with those interested in examining alternatives to the two dominant ideologies that Hillman pinpointed in his era, ideologies that have only grown even more pervasive and persuasive today.
I think there are two dominant ideologies in our culture today. One is economics and one is therapeutic. The bottom line and growth, or the bottom line and human potential. They're the two things we believe in, that are fundamentally we believe in. We don't believe in the institutions, we don't believe in culture, we don't believe in education, we don't believe in the churches. I don't know how to do the right thing. I don't even know what's right. I have no answer, but I sure smell something wrong with the government. And with the federal government, which I pay for, something wrong with airport safety, airline prices, gas prices, car efficiency, income tax loopholes, agricultural supports, PACs, rail service, sabotage of the postal service, unions and union busting, aid to schools, military pensions, vet hospitals, drug testing, remedial education, busing. Where does the wrongness end? I used to get stopped cold in political arguments. I would be going on about something and the other guy would say, all right, if you're so smart, what would you do about it? and I had no positive idea what to do, no program, nothing. It wasn't just that I was impractical, I was empty. My protests were suddenly emptied out because I had nothing positive to offer.
A podcast, being one voice on a very crowded digital platform, is also a fundamentally empty protest. But hey, we've all got to do whatever it is we feel called to do as we await the shipwreck, as Hillman described it in his many lectures on this topic, the eco-apocalypse that might still one day awaken us as a species, as well as individuals, from our collective, as well as personally destructive consumer habits. But I don't want this to be all doom and gloom either. I also want to capture and celebrate the fun, wisdom, and earnest tomfoolery of Hillman and Ventura's collaboration, channeling something of that spirit with those that I talk to here. Hillman and Ventura produced what I believe to be a truly unique book 30 years ago, emerging as it did from two truly unique and interesting lives. We've had 100 years of psychotherapy and the world is getting worse never conforms to the typical formulas or scripts found in other psychotherapy and self-help books of the time and thereafter. This is something I very much admire about it, so there's lots to explore here, including many interesting parallels and differences to be drawn between that era and ours.
We've been, I feel like there's a lot more we could talk about, but we're running out of time. And I really want to thank both of you for being with us today.
Well, thank you.
Running out of time.
Running out of time. Time is the fourth partner in our dialogue.
Well, we just finished talking about the apocalypse, so we're running out of time.
Yeah.
Pick up if you're there.
I hope you'll join me, as perhaps we are all now, in a profound way, running out of time, both in the context of our own lives. I was a young man of 20 struggling at university with mental health issues when this book was first published, and now I'm a middle-aged man still struggling with similar challenges as I revisit this text. But also, collectively, as the human inhabitants of this planet, we are running out of time. The world seems to be facing an unprecedented convergence of crises, the urgency of environmental catastrophes, the continued rise of social inequality and other worrying trends pointing to diminished well-being, particularly for children and young adults. Coupled with the ongoing erosion of social cohesion, it feels like we're also running out of time for viable solutions. Despite being the inheritors of 130 years or more of psychotherapeutic interventions, our day-to-day human experience, a reflection of the world around us, seems to beg the question, are things getting better or rather much, much worse, even when compared to 1994? And if so, what to do about that, both collectively and individually, other than one more empty protest such as this? Maybe we just need more therapy, that's all, more inner work, more self-development, or maybe just more genuine, non-digital human connection. Who knows? What do you think? Send me an email if you like, stevewasserman@gmail.com, and let's talk further. Your thoughts and perspectives, either as a client, patient, therapist, or just another human animal living on this planet right now, are invaluable to this discussion, so please don't hesitate to reach out and add your voice to the mix. Until then, take care.
I know that there's someone out there who knows what the hell is happening. You know that we must do something. God knows and he's not helping. Paranoia. Oh, you are hysterical and sad. Let's do it, babe. You know I love you. be bad. I wonder why you love me, baby. I hardly love myself at all. I think